As tough as it might have been to watch Egor Demin officially announce he's entering the NBA draft, the good news is BYU is already stacking up options in the transfer portal, and one of them could be coming from right inside the Big 12.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Coming up on today's show, basketball-heavy edition as we talk about who Robert Wright III is and what he offers to the BYU basketball program. We'll talk about Baylor's consternation with BYU, apparently, and we'll finish up with what BYU's doing to round out this roster in the transfer portal, because Kevin Young and company, they are doing work. All right, so let's start off today. Robert Wright III is the hot, target when it comes to BYU and the transfer portal right now. He's a former Baylor guard who is apparently very comfortable playing in the Marriott Center. Now, BYU and Baylor only played one game this past season. Remember that 93-89 spectacle, upwards of 26 or so NBA. We're talking talent evaluators, whether they're scouts, there are two GMs in the building to watch guys like Egor Demin, Cannon Catchings, VJ Edgecombe, and this plucky guard who 6'1", 183 pounds, Robert Wright III. He was absolutely cooking that night. I know VJ Edgecombe led the way for Baylor with 28 points, but if you look at Robert Wright's stat line that night, 6 of 12 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, 8 of 8 from the free throw line, ends up with 22 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds against just 2 turnovers. Now, I remember watching Robert Wright in that game and thinking, okay, that kid's really, really good. And as the season progressed, his numbers don't jump out at you. He averaged a shade under 12 points per game. He averaged also about 4.2 assists. So very capable numbers. His shooting lines, 41.4% overall from the field, 35.2% from three. But much like Egor Demin, he was a true freshman this past season, and BYU apparently is intrigued enough that they have gone after him in terms of at least talking NIL parameters. Now, there are various reports out there. There are people who have said that programs like a Villanova, I know that Cam Stewart over at Locked On Baylor said that Villanova, there were reports that Villanova offered him $5 million. BYU ranged anywhere from what I've seen online from $3.5 to $4 million. Regardless of what the NIL figure actually might be, the simple fact of the matter is BYU thinks that Robert Wright is the option they think can come in and fill a void at point guard. With Egor Demin exiting, and that was a very, heartfelt press conference yesterday. I think it was very clear about what BYU means to him, but he's now getting an opportunity to go and chase his dream. And if you want more thoughts on what I took away from Egor Demin officially announcing he's stepping into the NBA draft, go back and watch the special edition I did shortly after he had his press conference yesterday. But BYU now has the benefit of being able to use the time remaining here in the portal to go out and find options. And they didn't spend very long looking in the portal because Robert Wright III entered the portal. I believe it was over the weekend he officially entered it. And he has had a bevy of programs after him. A true freshman averaging a shade under 12 points and just north of 4 assists. That's absolutely what BYU needs in this offense. He showed very capable of taking care of the basketball all season long. I think his turnover numbers, 2.1 turnovers on average. Those are very, very solid numbers for a freshman. And I figure if he comes into BYU and he's playing alongside the likes of an AJ DeBonsa, alongside a Richie Saunders, having a big man like Kevin Keita and whoever else BYU attracts in the front court, his pick and roll ability is going to be enhanced. His ability to drive and kick, everything about his game will be enhanced in this BYU offense. And I think that's why BYU has targeted him here. I have heard various reports talking with people that I trust when it comes to Robert Wright that it could be done as soon as today. And maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, he very well is announcing his commitment to BYU. Joe Tipton, who's one of the most informed reporters out there when it comes to stuff like this, he put in, I know that 24/7 calls it a crystal ball. I think On3 calls them just predictions. He's predicting BYU to pick up Robert Wright III, but He's not the size of a Egor Demin. Egor Demin, 6'9". Robert Wright is listed at 6'1", $183. So he is a pint-sized dynamo at point guard. But I'm telling you, the numbers do not lie. And I think this would be a tailor-made fit to go into what BYU has. And yeah, if they have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to do so, great. Guess what? We have heard from BYU boosters who are well-heeled and have significant deep pockets. We will not be outbid. So if BYU believes in this kid, Kevin Young believes in this kid, whoever on his staff also is locked in with him, they can turn now to the collective and the boosters who are funding BYU's collective efforts and say, this is what it's going to take. And if they put the money where their mouth is, BYU is absolutely in the mix here, and it appears they have done just that. So I really am intrigued with Robert Wright III, and I think he's a perfect fit, a perfect replacement for BYU at that point guard spot. This juncture, those of you probably saying, well, Jake, why aren't they going out there to ask if Dallin Hall or Elijah Crawford want to come back? Based on the conversations that I've had with folks as well, is that ship is sailed for both of them. Dallin Hall feels like he's better suited to go and get a fresh start and have a more prominent role in a program elsewhere. I think the same thing with Elijah Crawford. He was buried on the bench, and even with BYU's expanded rotation they played last year, he couldn't even sniff breaking into that 10, 11-man rotation. So I think those two, you can safely say thank you for everything, and you move on from that. But Robert Wright, I think, appears to be what I would envision BYU needs in this instance. And yes, you're probably going to have to pay a pretty penny, but BYU's already paying a pretty penny. The reports on AJ DeBonsa go up to north of $8.5 million. BYU's NIL efforts are not going unnoticed nationwide. Trust me, I have people from all over the country I've done radio shows with, et cetera, that are hitting me up from time to time saying, Jake, is BYU serious about what they're doing with NIL? And the only thing I can really pass along to them is, yeah, they are. And haters going to hate. Obviously, there are people out there who are going to use that term, you can buy anything in this world with money. Yeah, you can. And BYU is proving that now that it's above board and NIL is an kosher thing with regards to the NCAA. And we'll see what happens with that House settlement, how it might change the whole dynamic when it comes to NIL efforts and obviously paying top dollar for talent. But until that day, BYU's in it to win it. And a guy like Robert Wright, he's the type of talent that can help BYU elevate even further than they did last year. It feels like at this juncture, BYU's floor, like the expectation next year, is the Sweet 16. They need to push further than that. They got to go to an Elite Eight. They got to push for a Final Four. They've got the pieces coming together. And if Robert Wright is indeed going to be a BYU Cougar, he looks like a perfect fit in what I project to be a starting point guard for Kevin Young and company, even though he is dwarfed by a guy like Egor Demin. I think he's got the skills that would absolutely fit what BYU needs, especially at this critical juncture as they try and retool this lineup after the loss of Egor Demin. All right, coming up next, Baylor fans are upset. You don't say. We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades. Supply House, whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order your products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right, plus with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so always talk to a real person. That's a very important thing in this day and age. Too much of it is AI anymore. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it is your turn, my friends. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com to get started today using that promo code SH5 to save 5% on your order. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this fine Wednesday. All right. So I watched certain episode of Locked On Baylor yesterday, and my good friend Cam Stewart, and I call him a good friend because he is just that. We have done a number of shows together. We have done Locked On Big 12 squads. We've done crossover editions. And Cam had some interesting comments. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you're a Baylor fan watching this podcast, sorry, but that's the price of doing business. And I will also say this. If you're going to argue that BYU's tampering, newsflash, everybody is tampering when it comes to the transfer portal. I'm sorry to break it to you. If that's breaking news to you, I don't know what else I can really do to regain your trust. But the simple fact of life is, we hear coaches often out there who say, I've got receipts from X and X university that they were tampering with our players. How many of those actual coaches have actually given said receipts? 0? 1? I think there was a football one. Was it who's the guy, offensive coordinator at Boise State? It'll come to me at some point. But simple fact of life is, these coaches can claim they've got receipts out there. Every single one of them has got skeletons in the closet, and they don't want their dirty laundry being aired if they air said dirty laundry about other programs. So Baylor fans, I understand you're upset. I understand that this young man, speaking of Robert Wright III, may have reneged on a contract or whatever other paperwork he may have signed to stay with the Baylor Bears. He opted to go elsewhere, and if BYU is where he ultimately lands, sorry, but here's the other part about it. Cam claimed that the church, speaking of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the sponsoring institution for Brigham Young University, is the one that's footing the bill for this. Wrong. Here's the deal. BYU as an entity, yes, the university itself is funded by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They subsidize the education of all of the the students attending school there. I went to BYU. I had my education subsidized by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But BYU and BYU Athletics are two different entities. Yes, let's talk about this. Now, BYU Athletics is obviously an athletic department that operates inside BYU, Brigham Young University. But there are no funds, and they are tithing funds is what is the big deal with regards to BYU. That is what funds the university, and obviously the subsidization of the education, that type of stuff. BYU Athletics does not, has not, and will not ever receive a dime of said tithing funds. They are considered to be sacred. They are not to be used for things like athletics. For years, there have been accusations that BYU Athletics has been subsidized by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know people inside the BYU athletic department. I have family and friends who have worked at BYU. I can say without hesitation that no tithing funds, no funds from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, some of you Baylor fans may call it the Mormon Church, are going to BYU Athletics. BYU Athletics has to eat what it kills, to use that expression. The money BYU Athletics generates is what it has to operate its budget on. For years, quite literally decades, BYU did more with less. They were scrimping and saving and trying to get by with what they had. Trust me, you can talk to some of the coaches that coach under Lavelle Edwards, and they will tell you some absolutely incredible stories. Even when Bronco Mendenhall left for Virginia back, was that 2016? I had at least 2 coaches on his staff that went with him to Virginia who made it explicitly clear the reason why they were leaving BYU wasn't because they were unhappy being at BYU. It's because Virginia more than doubled their salaries. Now BYU is finally in the Power Four. They are making tens of millions of dollars via the contracts, TV and otherwise, that are coming in from their membership in the Big 12 Conference. And all of a sudden, all everybody wants to talk about is how BYU is just spending money like they're a drunken sailor. Great. So be it. Here's the deal. Brigham Young University Athletics aspires to be a top-tier athletics department. And I'm talking a department. They want to have top-tier football, top-tier basketball. They want to have top-tier everything. It's not just that BYU is funneling money into 1 or 2 sports. They want to have an athletic department that is competitive across the board. They just won both the men's and women's cross-country titles this past year. They have got the Cougarettes, their dance team is 22 or 23-time national champions. Their soccer program has made it to a collegiate cup multiple times. They are competitive in multiple sports, but they understand that where the most money is generated from BYU Athletics is in football and men's basketball. So therefore, the lion's share of the money goes to those 2 programs. Therefore, BYU athletics is going to allow boosters who have got hundreds, if not hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in the bank, who are tech entrepreneurs, supplement manufacturers. They have made money in a myriad of ways out there, and they want nothing more than to help BYU athletics succeed in its mission to be a top tier Big 12 program, if not a top tier juggernaut in college athletics. So I understand that there can be accusations from my good friend Cam about the church funding this and paying these players like Robert Wright allegedly to come to BYU. That ain't it. That is absolutely factually incorrect. That money, if it is that Robert Wright III does pick BYU, will be coming from BYU's collective and obviously the revenue shares that are coming into effect once this house settlement is instituted. TBD on when that happens, but that should lay out exactly why BYU and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, cannot be equated on the same level when it comes to NIL, because BYU athletics once again operates with its own budget that it generates itself. There is no subsidization of BYU athletics from the main campus, Brigham Young University. It's not subsidizing anything with BYU athletics. So if you want to be upset about it, so be it. And I understand when you lose a guy the caliber of a Robert Wright and he may be going to a program of another religiously affiliated university. Yeah, it's easy to cast accusations. It's easy to say that, hey, see, they're cheating and the church is helping them out. It's simply not the case. And I can't say anything more than that is going to prove my case other than telling you, like I said, I know people in the BYU athletic department. I've had family and friends who have worked at Brigham Young University, and I know how the inner workings go on at BYU. Trust me, bro. I guess that's the best way I can say. But yeah, so if you're upset, I understand. But at the same time, welcome to the reality of college sports. He who has the most money apparently wins more often than not. And like I said, for years, I have done this podcast for 6.5, coming up on 7 years. I have done nearly 2,000 audio episodes. I don't know how many thousands on YouTube. I do this literally every single day. And I talked often for years about how BYU did more with less. And I always advocated BYU invest in athletics, invest in football, invest in men's basketball. I use the term do more with more. And now that BYU's doing more with more, speaking of more with more money, suddenly they're the devil. I don't know. So be it. And if you want to come at me, go for it. My mentions are always a mess. Trust me. I've got all kinds of fun going on YouTube comments, social media, email, and the like. Reach out anytime. I'm happy to hear you out, but you start getting personal with me, that's where I draw the line. All right. Nonetheless, there you go. That should hopefully, in theory, clear up a few aspersions and a certain set of accusations that, like I said, my good friend Cam Stewart on Locked On Baylor decided to throw around, I think a little bit recklessly yesterday on his edition of Locked On Baylor. All right, coming up next, BYU's not putting all of their eggs in the Robert Wright III basket. That would actually be really dumb if Kevin Young did all that, because let's be honest, if BYU gets outbid, Robert Wright III might be going elsewhere. But who else is BYU looking at? I've got 2 other names you'll want to monitor in terms of BYU's transfer portal targets, and we'll delve into them next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you want the inside scoop, the first word of anything that I have in terms of my insider knowledge about BYU athletics, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. That is where that information is coming to you first. And the best part is it's coming to your phone in the form of a text message. To be a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, it's just $4.99 a month, $5. To make it easy for you guys. And the kicker is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you're charged a single penny for it. And like I said, it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You can fire back with thoughts of your own. I have a lot of good conversations with hundreds of our listeners, and I appreciate all your patronage so far and hope that, hundreds of you more will want to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Link is in the show notes below. I may throw up a graphic and post-prod here that'll be easy to click on if you're watching this on YouTube as well. But thank you to all of you who have joined, and hope many more of you will be joining the Locked On Cougars Insider Group in short order. All right, as I mentioned, BYU is casting a wide net when it comes to the transfer portal. And At the same time, they're being plenty picky, and I don't mean that to sound negative about BYU. Kevin Young knows what he's chasing and knows what he wants inside his program. He's got top-tier talent coming in the form of an AJ DeBonsa, and he wants to surround him and Richie Saunders, pending Richie Saunders officially announcing he's coming back to BYU, with the best talent available around them. Well, we talked a lot about Robert Wright III, and I think, like I said, he's a tailor-made fit for BYU, but he is not the only target out there that I believe BYU is looking at. And in fact, I'm not saying it, I believe, I know they're not looking at, because they're constantly evaluating prospects literally worldwide. BYU's connections via Kevin Young and his staff, their tentacles, to use that expression, literally go worldwide, and they can reach out to Europe. They can go to Africa. They could go to the Far East. They can go anywhere in the world and find talent, but they also have those inroads with relationships they have here stateside. There are two more names you'll want to monitor, I think, in the coming days, and this could be outdated as soon as I publish it, but nonetheless, two more names you'll want to watch in the transfer portal market for BYU. We'll start off stateside here, and this is a kid, speaking of Xavier Lee, from Princeton, out of the Ivy League. Princeton, Ivy League schools. Forgive me. He's a Princeton Tiger, 6'4", 180-pound product of Toronto, Ontario. And Xavier Lee, what he has done this past 3 seasons, he's a junior at Princeton, is he has been a scoring machine. He averaged 17.1 points in 2023-2024. This past season, I saw that go down to 16.9 points per game. But more importantly, he's a stat-stuffing machine. He has averaged nearly 6 rebounds the past 2 seasons, and also this past season, 5.5 assists, 1.2 steals, on average just 2.2 turnovers. He is a really, really nice prospect, and the shooting numbers on him are not elite. The three-point number this past season, 36.6%. But his scoring ability and his ability to play on the wing, I think, is a tailor-made fit for what Kevin Young is looking for. I mentioned he's 6'4", 180 pounds, and the fact he's gone to Princeton, he's not going to have to worry about academics, because if he got into the Ivy League, he can swing it at BYU for all intents and purposes. I really like what we've talked about. I talked earlier this week about Makai Mason, who's a 40% three-point shooter, knockdown shooter from Washington. BYU understands that they need to have guys who are capable of being secondary scoring options for BYU on offense. Let's say AJ DeBonsa comes down to the court and gets stymied for whatever reason. Well, he needs an opportunity to be able to kick it out to somebody and have them see if they can find a way to score. Well, Xavier Lee has proven that in large doses for the Princeton Tigers. And I think he would be a really, really nice fit for this BYU offense. Think of him in, I would consider, kind of the mold of a Dawson Baker. Dawson Baker is more crafty than he is anything else, but he's a proven scorer. And I think Dawson Baker is going to be a really nice piece to have on the wing for BYU next year. I think Xavier Lee offers that, but even more than Dawson Baker does, Xavier Lee, I think, is better defensively, moves better laterally based on what I saw in the short film study I did on him ahead of this podcast. And I think this would be a really, really nice addition for the BYU basketball program if they can land Xavier Lee. Now, I mentioned that BYU staff, they obviously want to go look worldwide as well. Well, there is a prospect over in Spain, and that should sound familiar because didn't Egor Demin just come over from Spain from Real Madrid, Jake? Yes, he did. Well, they may be hitting that same part of the world once again for a prospect by the name of Sergio de la Rea. And I'm probably going to butcher that pronunciation for any of you Spanish speakers, but he is a Spanish national. He currently plays for Valencia in Spain's ACB league, which is one of the top-tier leagues in Europe. Routinely, teams from that, like Real Madrid, Valencia, they play in the Euro League. And he is a 6'6" playmaking point guard who, according to a NBA draft, a scouting report on him from Kevin O'Connor, formerly of The Ringer, now of Yahoo Sports, talked about the fact that his strengths, positional size, and he lists him here, speaking of De La Rea, at 6'7". I saw him at 6'6", but he says he can see over the defense, has the vision to make every read in the book. That sounds very familiar, much like Egor Demin. There's a flair to his playmaking as well, given the way he changes the angle of his arm to make certain passes. He'll go low into the side for a bounce pass into the paint or over the top for kickouts, and he's decisive with these decisions while limiting careless turnovers. That sounds very intriguing. He also mentions this. He has combo guard skills. He's a high IQ cutter, which what BYU plans on doing, I think, with this offense with AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders is absolutely a weapon to have guys who can cut like this, keeps the ball moving fluidly, and offers a smooth, lefty stroke to hit catch and shoot threes. Jeez, talk about I'm intrigued. On the season, he made 45.2% of his threes. Yep, sign me up. Bring in Sergio De La Reyes. So I get all that. He says he's likely not quite that elite, as his free throw percentage has been closer to average, but he has a clean form and shoots it with confidence. And he also mentions this. He has the size to someday guard multiple positions if he gets stronger, but as of now, he displays the IQ to make proper rotations and the heart to stay locked in. This is an NBA draft prospectus for Sergio De La Reyes. I'm intrigued. And I talked to some people who I thought would have a better feel for what Sergio De La Reyes bring to the table. And they said, yes, he could be a guy that BYU wants to bring in, but they also cautioned that they don't think that he is as polished as a Egor Demin was coming to BYU as a freshman. Now, Sergio De La Reyes is the same age and actually, in fact, is a little bit older than Egor. He's currently already 19 years old, but I really do think that this could be an intriguing option in terms of the overseas market that BYU has hit up routinely. I think the pieces for BYU roster-wise are going to come together pretty nicely. Yes, they have an unproven commodity in Kadeem Mboop. What does he end up being for the BYU basketball program? He's a freak athletically. What's Dominique Diomande look like as a guy who's coming over? His last time he played was in France. He spent half a season at Washington and transferred. What do those two offer? But I will also add this. Some of you are going to scream at me. Well, BYU needs big men. Yes, they need big men, but the latest is the BYU is focusing on the wings right now, and I'm assuming we'll address the big men issue later. BYU's program, with what Kevin Young is operating like and the way it appears he's recruiting, is going to be wing-centric. It's going to be guard-driven in terms of its overall prowess out there. And I don't think that's a bad way to go about it. He wants to play a very NBA style of basketball. The era of the big man with the back to the basket in the NBA, it's gone. It's all about spacing. It's all about playmaking on the wing. And he's got two bona fide playmakers in AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders on the wing. Now he's surround them with talent. And let's say you get a Robert Wright and a Sergio De La Reyes to come in and be your 2 point guards next year. I think it'd be a pretty nice tandem to have. You bring in Xavier Lee and Makai Mason, who are scorers and bona fide shooters from the perimeter. Those are exactly what BYU is trying to do. They're trying to set this team up for success. More importantly, they're trying to set it up where it's versatile, much like it was this past year. They could mix and match and morph into whatever they needed to be at multiple points. And that's a big reason why BYU finished the season on the run that they did. 9 straight wins going into the Big 12 tournament and then ultimately making a run to the Sweet 16. The versatility BYU's roster offered last year was a major strength for BYU. And I think guys like Xavier Lee and Sergio De La Reyes absolutely could be fantastic pieces if they so choose to come to Brigham Young University. All right, so there you go. I think that's enough for today. Enough basketball talk, enough, saying exactly what BYU and how they operate is. So as always, thank you for all of your support. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share this with your Baylor Bears friends and tell them, hey, get over it. But nonetheless, be nice. We're obviously supposed to be Christ-like and be loving in all of our communications. But nonetheless, once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.